Started now. Hello, welcome to the people watching the recording as well. I have now started recording, so we're good there. We are on Git 3, the final Git lecture of the semester. Not the final lecture, we have plenty more to go, but the final Git lecture. This one is personally one that I'm pretty excited about. We basically split up part of Bash 2 and then created a whole new Git lecture, so we're going to try this out. This is new for this semester, but I'm really excited to be presenting this one. So let's get started. Our objectives for today are going to be talking about Agile, Scrum, and Kanban. So all three of these things are versions of workflows and methodologies in how everyday software engineering workplaces attempt to organize getting work done. Then we're going to go to Git in CS196, and we're going to talk about how we're running the project this semester, how you're going to sort of interact in 196 during your projects, because we are starting projects next Tuesday. Talk about that at the end of lecture today. But we're going to be talking about Git and how we use it in 196, as well as GitHub in general. And then we're going to talk about our third and final workflow, which is basically how you will interact with GitHub and sort of keep track of everything, take advantage of some of the workflows we're talking about in the first half. And then I don't think we're going to have time for continuous integration and deployment, so we'll see on that. All right, merge conflicts. This was something from last lecture. I just wanted to kind of review it, make sure that everyone's on the same page. And so a merge conflict is basically when there are two conflicting changes in the same area of a file, and those changes are from different commits. And what happens is you will need to sort that out yourself. And so you'll remember last time we talked about how, if I get my pointer here, you have what you have locally and what you have on a different branch or in the remote. And then you'll basically be given like these boundaries to kind of work within and determine what you want to keep and what you want to get rid of. You'll do that, and eventually you'll get something a lot cleaner to kind of clean that up. If this doesn't sound familiar, I definitely recommend going back to lecture 2 and reviewing some of those concepts, as well as branching. This was the other thing that we talked about, and that is we make commits in a linear fashion just like before, except we can now branch onto different branches by checking out a new branch, and then commit just like normal, and then merge back in so that we can have all of these changes be put on separate branches so that we don't have to worry about potential merge conflicts being as bad. So that's a review of last lecture. Let's talk about Agile, Scrum, and Kanban. So all three of these things are used really interchangeably, but they're fairly different things. So this is a really good way, in my opinion, to sort of describe the difference of them. I put together this little graphic to help out. So Agile is sort of the overarching idea. So Agile is a process of it's a methodology. And so it's this process of taking a large task and breaking it up into much smaller, achievable tasks, so that someone who is looking at it doesn't have to see this big task in front of them and not know where to go. So that's the idea behind Agile. And then you have Scrum and Kanban, which are two different ways of accomplishing Agile methodologies. So essentially, Scrum we'll talk about next, and then we're going to talk about Kanban, but there are two ways of implementing Agile methodologies. So Scrum is basically the idea of taking a large goal and then breaking it up into sprints. So a sprint will generally start by talking about what you want to get accomplished, talking about what needs to get done, what you're looking for, and then planning out that sprint. And then you'll go into a sprint, and you will generally work in it for 2 weeks. Some places do 4, but the more common one is 2 weeks. And during that time, in a real company, back in the time before COVID, you would actually have a meeting where you would talk about what you did the day before and kind of where your head is at, what you're stuck on, what you're working on. And you would talk about all of those things every day so that everyone was kind of on the same page and you could pick up new tasks and get everything done for that sprint. And that is sort of an iterative process that you would keep on doing over and over and over again until these goals that you set out to do are done and deployed and ready to go. So that's sort of an overview of Scrum. And let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. Yep. So here's kind of a way that Scrum breaks things down. So first off, you have epics, then you have user stories, and then you have tasks. So an epic is the macro level task you're attempting to accomplish. Generally, there are only a few of these or just one per sprint. And the idea is it's something big, like making a new feature that's going to impact the user in a large way, or it's going to be something that is describing basically the end goal. Then you have user stories. And user stories are the idea of what comprises the epic. So what in a user story tells you, like a user story basically tells you what an epic should do. So if you look at the bottom there, I have a few examples. So the general format should be as a blank, I want to blank so that blank. And what that means is that you're saying as a user or as an advertiser or as a customer, I want to log in, send a message, do something so that I can use the app, communicate with friends, whatever it may be, right? And so this idea is that an epic is some sort of feature or overarching idea, and then a user story basically tells different pieces of that feature and how a user or someone else will interact with it. And so user story is super useful because you can then take all these ideas of here's how I want a user to interact with the app, right? They're going to log in, then they're going to tap on this button, then they're going to order something, then they're going to check out, or they're going to log in, they're going to upload a photo, they're going to be able to apply a filter, whatever it may be, right? So all of these different things are different user stories that you can put into one epic. Then within there, you have tasks. So within each user story, you have a task, and tasks are an individual thing that a developer can do. So this is something that we'll talk about in a minute, but basically your PM will assign you a task looking sort of at the user story in the epic level and give you certain tasks to get complete, but they're all much smaller and easier for you to understand. Instead of being like, as a user, I want to log in, it will be make the login page or integrate the login script so that when someone clicks log in, it checks if their username and password are correct. Something like that. And there are small tasks that are bite-sized chunks that developers can work on. So let's talk about Kanban now. So Kanban is a little bit harder to describe because there's so many different ways of doing it. Kanban has 20 different ways within itself. But in general, the key components are visual, that it's a visual system and that there are columns involved. So you can see here that we have a couple of columns, and within there you have certain tasks that need to happen. And keep in mind, these tasks are independent of tasks in Scrum. These are just something to do. So something will get put into play, and then as you move it across, there are different statuses. And the idea with Kanban is that no one column can have more than a certain number of tasks. And it just depends on what company, what the project is, whatever, and that determines what that number is. But the idea is that way you don't have a massive backlog buildup. So that's kind of a general overview of Scrum and Kanban. And CS196 is an interesting place because we used to be very much so on the Kanban side of things when it came to project planning. However, nowadays, we've started implementing, starting with last semester, Scrum, and now this semester we're moving more towards the Scrum side of things. So we still have elements of Kanban, but we use a lot more Scrum than we did in the past couple of years. So let's start with a question. Let's send a question. The cam is in front of me. Oh, there was text on the right. Let me go back to that slide and remove it. Oh, yeah, this one probably. All that said was just like sprint review and retrospective. I'll just kind of go through these real quick. just in case anyone missed anything. Okay, so let me turn my camera back on. All right, so let's go with the poll. Let me start up the poll. All right, so if you go into hashtag pollbot, we've got a whole 7 options this time around. And so the question is, which of the following are not related to Scrum? And so there are a bunch of different options here. Feel free to choose whichever one you think is right. There is a correct answer. Also, pollbot is broken. Let me try and fix that. All right, so if you put in a question already, we're going to try that again. All right, so try reacting now, and this time it should work a little bit better. All right, I'll give it another second here. All right, so it looks like it's almost unanimous. Everyone is saying Odysseys. That is correct. That was the first thing that came to mind in terms of coming up with the incorrect answer here. So we just talked about tasks, epics, sprints. Agile is the methodology really that Scrum is implementing, and then user stories are in between tasks and epics, and then all of the above is wrong because Odysseys is not related to Scrum. So question 2, I'm going to create the poll. How long are sprints roughly? And so I know someone's probably going to complain about this. In reality, yes, there are different answers that there could be, but there is one answer that I sort of hinted at. But I also kind of set up the answers in a way that it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. All right, so it looks like it was almost unanimous again. Everyone's saying number 3. Awesome job so far. So that is correct. Sprints are generally 2 weeks. That's about average. Sometimes you'll see sprints that are 1 week. Sometimes you'll see them go around 4. It really depends on the company, but 2 weeks is a good general number that a lot of people like to use. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So we're going to transition now to talking about projects in CS196. So Tuesday, we're going to have an amazing start to the project part of the course. We're having the project kickoff. If you can be there, please be there. It's going to be really fun live. We're going to have everyone go into the Discord channels where they'll be able to meet their PMs, anyone else in their group that's able to attend live, all of that good stuff. So it's going to be a little bit more of a live lecture. There really isn't a lecture component so much. It's more just being there so that you can meet your PMs and groups and everything else. But we're not talking about that today. Today we are talking about how those projects are run. So we're going to start with talking about the structure of the repository. So this is very common. You'll see this with a lot of companies where there will be repository structures. So there's a standardization among a repository so that you aren't looking at a repository thinking, what is this across a company? You can go to any repository and it'll look fairly similar, like from repository to repository within a company. That was a tongue twister. Okay, so the main goal here is that we have a couple of folders, well, 3 folders, and then a couple of files. And we're also going to talk a little bit more about Git than we've talked about in the past. So first off, we have the docs file. So this is something that, or the docs folder. So this is going to have a couple of files. It's going to have the run.md, which is a markdown file, which is going to define how to run your project. Pretty self-explanatory, but the main goal is that you want to be able to tell someone about any dependencies they need, any sort of heads up before they try and run your project and it doesn't work, right? This is how to get from 0 to 100 with setup. And then you have plan.md. This is going back to that idea that we were just talking about, basically the epics. This is sort of what each sprint is going to do and sort of the outcome for each sprint. And then details with that. So for example, if you look on the right here, this was a project that my group last semester worked on. They were basically building a planning app for your like course assignments and everything else. And so we just had a bunch of sketching going on, and you can see sort of this idea. So the plan.md can be anything. It doesn't have to be a .md file. It could just be like an image or a PDF or whatever. But it should be some sort of file where we can see sort of the goal in a sort of in a perfect world. And then if something doesn't come out as planned, you can always change it midway through the semester and adapt it. The goal with the plan.md is to get the baseline epics going at a point where you kind of have an idea of what you're doing so that you can divide everything up throughout the sprint. Next section is the project section. So this is the project folder. It really depends on what your group is going to be doing. Some groups will have websites, some groups will have apps, some groups will have games, all kinds of things. Whatever's in the project folder just depends on your group, your PM, how that works out. But that's where you're going to put all of the files that you need for your specific project and the outcome, right? So this is going to be whatever in run.md, however you say, here's what to run, the people grading will go into the project folder and we'll do it there. So then we have the research folder. So the research folder is this idea that you have a folder for all of the work you do that isn't directly required for the project. So for example, we have a couple of net IDs here, and within each one, you have a couple of files in here. So you have a couple of like directories and then a notes file. So the idea here is that anything that isn't relevant to the project shouldn't be in the project folder. And so this is going to be especially important when it comes to the first sprint that isn't the MVP, so sprint 1, not sprint 0. So sprint 1 is generally, the recommendation is going to be that you get familiar with what tech stack you're using. So if you've never worked with Python before, you'll get to learn Python a little bit before you get started. Or if you're learning how to use React, you'll learn a little bit about React. Whatever it is, the goal is that your PM will assign some sort of task for you to do. And then within the research folder, you're going to put the output of that task. So maybe you did a tutorial, maybe you just read a couple of articles online, right? You're going to put something in there just so that you kind of can show what you did and then refer back to it later in the semester. And so each student is going to get one unique to yourself, and you can put whatever you want in there just depending on what you worked on during that sprint. So the repository structure also has a couple of files. The .gitignore is a unique file that Git recognizes. So the .gitignore is a special file that tells Git, hey, check inside here, and any files that match this type, don't let me add when I do git add all or git add dot or git add whatever. It will ignore those files. So we have a couple of default ones just based on past semesters, issues that people have had, but the big one is DS store for Mac. I'm not going to get into it, but essentially it's a default file that every Mac folder has. .gitignore prevents you from accidentally uploading that. And then we have the README, if my slides will advance too far. There we go. So the README is basically going to be a file that will have your group number, in this case group 0, the group name. You can name it whatever you want. We've seen some really creative, fun names in the past. We've seen some people who just went with group whatever their number was. Then a link to your MVP, which will be a document basically describing your overarching goal. So think an epic for all of your epics. It's like here's the end goal of our project type of thing. And that will get sent out during project kickoff. And potentially you can either start that during project kickoff or when your entire team is available to meet. Then we have the team members and the project managers. That's pretty self-explanatory. It just depends on how big your team is. We're aiming for something around like 5 or 6. Eustace, correct me in chat if I'm wrong on that. And then somewhere around 2, maybe 3 project managers per group. We also have a quick project description. Pretty much all you need to put there is just like something to kind of set the tone when whoever's grading is going through all these repositories so that they know what they're looking at. So that's the README.md, and that's just the entire file repository system there. Unfortunately, Eustace and I are not going to be co-PMing. I wish that would be a powerhouse group, but we are going to be doing different groups. So, and that was a question in the chat, by the way. So CS196 uses Agile and Scrum and Kanban, as we were talking about before. But if we look at this slide, this is kind of a general shoehorning of what we do into the Scrum system. So we combine a couple of roles in Scrum. So we have the project manager both define the sprint and then run the sprint. And we found that this works really well. And so in terms of the sprint, it's basically planned by the project manager. You have some involvement as well, deciding what you want to work on, what features you think your like app or whatever needs. And then it goes into the sprint. Everyone works for 2 weeks. Here you are. Clearly says you, doesn't say developers. And then we have weekly in the dark black because I replaced daily, because we have once weekly meetings. And so heads up, those meetings are mandatory. So just be aware that whenever your group does decide to set up meeting times, that you do have to show up. It is part of the class. Attendance is taken. Your grade is dependent on that. And for any questions about grading for the projects, I would advise you to look at the syllabus because we have some pretty detailed information in there. Here's the timeline for the sprints. So we are, as I said, doing project kickoff on, let's see, there we go. So we're doing project kickoff on sprint 0 or on 216, and then we are going to have that last about 9 days. And so sprint 0 is basically just, here's your, what would I say? It's basically working on the MVP. There we go. So the MVP is going to be a big part of Sprint 0. You're going to be determining that. You're going to meet with your group, kind of determine what everyone wants to work on and how you want to get there. So that's Sprint 0. Sprint 1 is setting up any tools you'll need, setting up the environment, the doing a couple tutorials and getting used to the tech stack. Then you have Sprints 2 and 3, which are going to be when you're really getting into your project, starting work, getting some stuff done. And then you have a midterm presentation where you're basically going to show what you have so far, kind of talk about your plans, all of that good stuff. We'll have way more information when that comes. We are currently more than or just under 2 months away from there. So don't worry about that too much yet. And then you have a couple more sprints before the project is due. So here we go. Question number 3, here we come. So this question is, you just completed a tutorial to get familiar with the tech stack. Where are you going to commit those files? Okay, I will give it another second here. Okay, so it looks like about 70% of you got the correct answer, answer number 5 of the 196 repo at the research folder. So that's correct. You don't want to be putting it in a separate repository because then your PM can't see it. And then you don't want to put it in your 125 repository because first off, nobody in 125 is going to understand why. And second off, we don't see that once again. Inside the 196 repo, you don't want it in your project folder because that's going to be some unused files that is just there then. So you want to put it in the research folder, and you don't want it at that top level directory because that's for keeping organization and everything clean. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Another question here. So we've got another not question, so be careful. So what information is not kept in the top level README.md file? This is probably going to be the hardest question of tonight because I did say a lot of different things really fast there. Okay, I'm going to close the bot. Okay, so it looks like 75% of you got it right. The answer is 2, not 3. So as I said before, the link to the minimum viable product doc is in there. It's that blue link that I mentioned pretty quickly. The meeting time is not in there because the meeting time varies and it really doesn't help with grading. So that's just up to the project manager and the rest of the team to decide. So that is the question. Let's go to our next slide here. So let's talk about your third and final workflow. We are there. We have reached the final workflow. Step 1, open up your repository. Look at this glorious setup that we have going here. We've got issues, we've got pull requests, we've got readmes, we've got everything here. We're going to break it all down for you. So we're going to start by going over to the project tab. So we're going to head over there and you're going to see there's going to be a sprint open up ready for you to go. It really depends on what sprint. You're going to start at sprint 0, then go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you stop at 5. But point being, we're just pretending this is sprint 2. So you're going to click on sprint 2 in this case, and you're going to get a menu that looks like this. And so at this point, I'm going to take the opportunity to open up GitHub Dev and get that open. So let's take a look here. Get lecture 3, there we go. Also be aware, I did use a language that we are not teaching in this course for this, so just be aware that you don't need to know anything about the language. This is purely for the workflow. So as I said, we're going to click on projects, we're going to go over to sprint 2, and here we are on that menu. So going back to the slides, we're going to start by deciding what we want to do, right? And so in this case, we want to show this unit test. We're going to do this issue. We're going to pretend it's assigned to us. Not sure who it was assigned to, but we'll see in a minute. So when you click on it, you're going to get something like this. So let's do that right now. So in this case, let's say write major functions. So it's going to load it up and you're going to get a bunch of details. So in this case, it says write the following functions, and then it gives us a couple of functions. It says I'm assigned. It tells us this is a feature, tells us which sprint it's a part of. All that good stuff on this sprint, or on this issue. But in this case, we're going to click this Go to Issue for Full Details button, because that way we can get a full screen look at what we're looking at. Also, I think this pointer is hiding my mouse from me, so let's see if that fixes it. No, it does not. Okay, but here we are. We now have a fully fledged issue menu, and we can take a look at everything here. So here's an example issue, and I'm going to size this up because we're going to break a lot of this down. So the first thing that we've got is, actually before that, we have the title. So we just have add unit tests. But then in there, we have a description of what we're doing. So it says write the following unit tests. here are a couple of tests for this function, here are a couple for this one. It really depends on what you're doing. In this case, I just made something up. Also, you don't really have to write unit tests for 196 depending on your PM. Sometimes it's a lot more helpful than you would think, but in general, unit tests aren't like a requirement for the project, just in case anyone heard unit tests and got afraid. Next up, we're going to look at assignees. So in this case, someone else is assigned to this issue, but if we look at the one that we're looking at here, you can see that's my net ID, I'm assigned. Then also this could be multiple students, so you're working together with someone. It really just depends on what your PM wants to do in terms of allocation. Labels will give you a label of sort of an idea of what you're working on. So for example, in this case, you have tests, so you know it's working on unit tests. In this case, I've got features, so we know it's a feature. We can also open up the tab here and then look at the labels, and we can see there are a couple of different labels, and in general, you're going to want to look at these two. You'll see a few bugs, but not many. And then blocked is if you get stuck, you can attach the label of blocked, and then someone, either PM or someone else in your group, can probably come help you. Okay, so labels basically categorize the tasks that people know what's going on. Then you have projects. So projects basically links this to that board that we were just showing that looks like a Kanban board right here. So this says, okay, throw it on here so that we can see it as a task like this. So that is what projects does. And milestone basically tells us, hey, here's everything, here's when they're due, and it gives us a little progress bar and a couple of other features on the PM side of things. So that's basically what an issue is. And if we look over on here again, I mentioned milestones, and then we go back here. So in this case, we're going to pretend that we're going to take this one, and in the demo, we're going to take a different one just for the sake of showing off doing this problem. So in this case, we're going to move it over to in progress because now we're not just planning on doing it, but we're actually going to do it. So we're going to move it over. As you can see, CGI effects right there. It is now in the in progress column. We are moving. So we're going to do the same thing over on our real demo here. So we're going to take write major functions and we're going to drag it over to in progress because we're now working on that. You'll see there's an update to the progress bar and it looks pretty nice. So let's go back to our amazing CGI masterpiece here and pretend to work on this task. So for our demo, we actually do have a repo. We're going to go in there. So I'm going to cd into my desktop / get lecture 3. And then let's see here. I'm going to open this folder and find the file that I need to modify. So as I said, ignore this language. You don't need to worry about it. Reversed. And then, yeah, we're just going to pretend. Oh, wait. Oh, I know what happened. We are on a different branch. So let me check the status. This is why you always check the status. So reset -- hard. Okay. So now if we do get status and so we're going to check out to a new branch. So in this case, let's see what branches we already have because I think I created a branch. Yep, so we're going to go get checkout feat merge sort. So we know that we're working on a feature. And forgot. There we go. Okay, so now you can see we switched that branch. And now if we go back to that file, not sure if it still has anything in there. We'll just throw something in, yeah. So we'll just say reversed, just to make a point. In reality, you'd obviously be doing something here. I'm not doing that, but in reality, you'd throw some real code in there and make it work. So now we're gonna git commit am. We're gonna say feature, and we're going to say finished merge sort. Right, and then we're going to git push. And so remember, we have to set the upstream for this branch. And so what happens here is basically I have that bracket, and that's what's making the branch freak out. So all you have to do when you have a bracket or something is add quotation marks, and it'll automatically fix it up. So now you can see we're pushing this back up, and we just did our amazing work for this issue. So let's go back to our code and let's just make sure that's there. You can see here it is, feet merge sort, just had to push a minute ago, and if we look at it, here's our commit. We can take a look at it and see our amazing changes that totally mean something. So now you'll see it's also going to prompt us, and we're going to talk about that now. So we are now done with the task, right? So if we go back over, go to projects, and we open this up, and let's open up that issue we were looking at. So we finished all of these, we're done, right? So now we got 3 out of 3, and we could close this and we're done, call it a day, right? No, unfortunately not. As I talked about and hinted at last lecture, we want to make sure that other people are looking at our code before we commit it. That's why we didn't merge it back into master and push it then. We want to make sure that everyone knows kind of what our code was and why we chose to do it that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what are called pull requests. So as I said, how do you review the code before merging it in? Pull requests. We are requesting to pull code into the code base. Or alternatively, another way to say it is we're proposing a change. So using our amazing CGI graphics here, we are going to go to pull requests and we are going to hit new pull requests. So let's follow along. We're going to go to pull requests. We're going to click new pull requests. And so now you'll see a couple of things here. So let's talk about this. So I'm going to enlarge this and we're going to break this down a little bit. So what you have first is the base, and this is telling you, here's the branch that you are going to merge changes into. So this is going to be your master, your main, your work in progress branch, whatever you call it, the branch you're trying to merge into. Then we have this nice little arrow, and then my terrible arrow that for some reason is like at a weird angle and is just driving me nuts. I've tried to fix it. I literally spent like 10 minutes on it, could not find it. But the arrow that janky arrow is pointing to is telling you that it's going to merge the right into the left. So that's why that arrow's there. And then we have the right-hand side, which is telling us what branch we're going to take the commits from. So let's go do that. So we are going to take a look at our example here. We're going to say we want feet merge sort. And now it'll say, okay, here are the commits. So here's more CGI. So it will take a look at this branch and it'll say, here are all the commits that are on this branch but are not on the branch you're trying to merge into. And so in this case, we have a couple commits. In our case, we only have one commit. It even shows you, here are the changes that were made for that one file. So that's awesome. And you can take a look at who did it, any comments about it, all kinds of stuff. So it'll also tell you whether it'll be able to merge or if you need to handle a merge conflict. So using more fancy CGI, we're going to highlight that create pull request and click that button, assuming I can find my mouse, which keeps disappearing on me. So now this is going to auto-populate another menu, and this is really important because this is something you're going to have to do a lot when you're working on your projects. So filling out these pull request forms are going to be really important. So the first thing is the title, and this should generally be something similar to the issue. So in this case, it's major functions because we're working on major functions. Next up, we have the comment section. So this is where you're going to write, here's what I did. And so we are going to add some stuff in there. So in this case, we're going to say finished writing impressive merge sort function with incredible efficiency using Eustace's algorithm, because Eustace came up with an amazing algorithm that tells us when we reverse a list, we know it's automatically sorted because that's how it works. In reality, that's not true, but we're going to pretend it is. So now that we've updated our little message here, we have a couple of things that we need to fill in on the right. So for all of these things, you're just going to click that little gear icon, you'll get a drop down, and you'll be able to fill it in. And I'll show you how that works in a minute. So here is that once we're finished. So first off, let's talk about reviewers. So the reviewer is going to be your PM or PMs, and it's going to basically tell them, hey, one of your students committed some code. They want you to review it before they merge it in. And so what this will do is it'll tell Eustace in this case, hey, we need you to update your code. So let's do that. Let's summon Eustace and ask for his help. There he is. All right. Next up, we're going to assign whoever is assigned to this pull request. So if it's yourself, you're going to hit assign yourself, or you can do it manually. So in this case, I'm going to put myself on, and because Welby is so trustworthy, we're going to throw him on here too. He was a great teammate and was totally working on this with me. Next up, we're going to add a label. So in this case, let's just say it was a feature that we worked on. Cool, we have a label. The label is probably the least important part of this process. Next up, you want to add it to the sprint that you worked on it for. So in this case, we worked on it for sprint 2, just on those milestones. So I'm going to go through our amazing CGI. There we go. And here is the most important part of the process. Do not mess this up, please. It makes life so much easier as a PM. If you click, so let's hit create pull request now. And if you go down here, there's linked issues. And so what you can do is you can click on linked issues, and let's take a look at the issue that we were solving. So we were doing write major functions. So we're going to link that issue. We're going to say, this is the issue we solved. And that is why we're linking it to this, because if this pull request goes through, we solved that issue is done. So now that we've created the pull request, we have the linked issue ready. And so now what Eustace can do, and what he's going to be doing in the background right now, is he is going to get an email saying, hey, Matt wants to make these changes. What do you think? And so he can go in, and what he'll be able to do is see this button here, and he'll be able to look at the changes that were made. He'll click this review changes, hit approve or deny. He can write some comments. He can also add comments to our code, and just generally add a bunch of different stuff to the pull request to let us know what he thinks. So in this case, Eustace added a fantastic message there and said, nice PR. Wish you hadn't merged it, but we're going to go with it. So in reality, a lot of your PMs are just going to merge it automatically. Sometimes you might merge it. You'll get, if we go back, so this is what you'll see before your project manager reviews it. So you'll have to wait around for your project manager to review it. But if you look at the project board before Eustace had merged it, this is what you would see. And you'll see there's a pull request there now, and your issue is over there. Then when your project manager starts reviewing it, it'll go over here using the magic of CGI. I've already done that. And then once Eustace is done, he would then mark it approved. In this case, totally not CGI, totally not doctored Eustace here. Left a comment saying awesome job instead of whoa, nice PR. And in this case, he also approved it. And so this is the menu that you would see if your PM doesn't approve it. All you do is you hit merge pull request just like before, and it would act in the same way as if you were doing it yourself. So then you click merge pull request, and next thing you'll know, the pull request is going to get moved over, and the issue is going to get moved over. So if we go back out, also you can click delete branch now that this feature is done, and now that branch is gone. So now if we go to projects and we click on sprint 2, you'll see in the done column that linked issue automatically got moved for us. So that's done, and the pull request got done because it was merged. And so now we've got a nice clean slate here, and we can start on our next issue. So there we go. That is the sort of idea behind the system there. And so we're going to do, actually, there we go. So we are going to do another poll. So poll create. So question number 5, what should you do after you finish committing changes for your task? Submit a pull request, merge the branch back into master, close the issue for that task, 1 and 3 together, or at your PM that you're done and just ask them what to do. Polbot broken again? Yeah, it looks like it. Okay, the upside is that I'm going to tell you this right now, that answer was wrong. Anyone who put 4 was wrong, so live with that fate. All right, I'm going to close the poll now. All right, so the correct answer, as some of you put, is number 1, to submit a pull request. So I knew this one was going to be kind of confusing. It looks like pretty much everyone just kind of went around the board, but about 50% of you got it right. So the correct answer is number 1, and that's because at the very least you want to submit that pull request. You shouldn't be merging back into master without having your project manager review it, and you shouldn't close the issue until the pull request is already in. Because if you're closing the issue, then what if your PM doesn't like what you've done? So that's why you don't want to close the issue until after the pull request is merged. And then obviously number 5 is wrong because you don't want to just start spamming your PM. That's kind of annoying. It's a nice to have though if you want to like at your PM once and be like, hey, I finished this thing. Can you check out the pull request? But don't be like just adding them without having that pull request ready. So I've actually finished only slightly early today. Good job on me. Couple of announcements. Project kickoff is next lecture, Tuesday, February 16th at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Be there. It is awesome. The more students that we can have attend live, the better. It's going to be a lot different from a normal lecture style. If you don't attend live, there really isn't going to be much to do. It's not going to be the same. So if you can attend live, I really recommend that you do. So that'll be the big thing. You're going to meet your project groups, all that fun stuff. Then I will be announcing the groups for projects during project kickoff. So only a few more days until you will meet your teammates for the rest of the semester. And then finally, I mentioned this on Discord through the announcements, and I'm just going to put this here. Because of the ad drop deadline and everything else and the world, we decided to extend the homework that was assigned before the ad drop deadline to this Friday. So if you haven't done any of that yet, or if you are stuck on something, I would recommend you start working on that. And if you're stuck on something, try to post to CampusWire. We don't have office hours until Saturday, but hopefully CampusWire will be a good enough solution. Those are all the announcements I had, though. I'm going to stick around in the lecture chat and let you know and answer any questions. But otherwise, thanks for attending. See you at the amazing project kickoff we're doing on Tuesday. And that's about it for today. Have a good weekend.